Good evening and welcome to the Pompey Politics Podcast, the podcast where we discuss matters of international, national and local political importance, but we do it in a calm and reserved way where we get to hear a diverse range of voices. My name's Ian Tiny Morris.
And I'm Simon Sansbury. Yes, we're here today to revisit that interesting subject of devolution and local government reorganisation as much as anyone can understand it at the moment. But to help us do that, we've asked for some voices from outside of Portsmouth to actually hear about how that might impact wider Hampshire and indeed the Isle of Wight. So joining us this evening, we have Andrew Garratt from the Isle of Wight and Malcolm Wallace, who's a Hampshire County Councillor representing Meon Valley. So welcome, Andrew and Malcolm.
Thank you very much.
Good evening.
Evening. Thank you. So let's get straight into it, and if I can ask you to just introduce yourselves, with the area you represent, and how you got into politics. If I can ask that first to Malcolm, please.
Well, good evening, and thank you for inviting me along this evening. It's should be an interesting discussion. So my name's Malcolm Wallace. I'm a dual hatter, so I'm a Winchester City Councillor for Central Meon Valley and Hampshire County Councillor for Meon Valley. I was first elected 3 years ago onto Winchester City Council, and I was the first Green on Winchester Council then. And just last year at a by-election, I was elected onto Hampshire County Council. And again, I was the first Green on Hampshire County Council when I got elected there. But the Greens have been growing rapidly across our region, and we had from no councillors at all 4 years ago, we are now at 18 across Hampshire and the Isle of Wight. It makes a huge difference having a Green in the room, and it's great to see the Green voice being heard a bit more loudly across our area.
Fantastic. Thank you very much. Andrew?
So my name is Andrew Garratt. I'm an Isle of Wight Unitary Authority Councillor, although we tend to call ourselves county councillors still, but strictly speaking, Unitary Authority Councillor. Been on this council for 8 years now, about to embark on the ninth and unexpected year because of the government's cancellation of our elections. And my involvement in politics goes back to 1991, when I was first elected to a council, dare I say, up the road from you in Southampton. I was a city councillor there at a rather more tender age than I am now. But my interest in politics dates back to first noticing way back in 1979 a lot of orange posters in my community for somebody called Steve Ross. And being quite young at the time, all my awareness of politics at that time was Labour and the Conservatives. So it was really interesting to me to see something different. And that was the then Liberals. And I've always been somebody who's been very much on the side of David versus Goliath in any sort of endeavour. And so it appealed to me greatly when the Liberals and then the Social Democratic Party formed an alliance through the 1980s, fought general elections, and then merged and became the Liberal Democrats. And so I've been very, very much involved in the party for the last 30 years, and looks like at least 1 or 2 more years more, given the government's intentions.
Perfect. So thank you both, and lovely to have both of you come on to give us your perspective. So let's start with the big question of devolution and local government reorganisation. We'll go a bit deeper, but if I can start with you, Andrew, first thoughts, particularly from an Isle of Wight perspective. Good idea, bad idea? What was your first thoughts when you heard the news?
My first thoughts were welcoming ones. I do believe strongly that the decisions that are made for local people should be made as much as possible by local people. And local means different things, of course, in different contexts. So you'll hear me talk later about the very important place that we have here on the Isle of Wight, and the importance we place on the Isle of Wight remaining as a single, separate, standalone unitary authority. But in terms of devolution, that means taking those decisions out of Whitehall, taking them off the desks of civil servants who are indeed democratically accountable, but to ministers who have more than enough to do and have to attend to those things across the whole of England, or maybe even across the whole of the United Kingdom. So I think it's far better to have decisions made much closer to home, focused on the priorities that can be expressed by local people. So the devil will, of course, will be in the detail, and we're still, I think it was you, Simon, at the start said that we're still beginning to understand what the government intends. In terms of local government reorganisation, I'm passionately opposed to any change for the Isle of Wight. We have been and were indeed the first unitary authority in the country, formed 30 years ago. We have successfully delivered services despite having to cut back, as so many councils have, under particularly the Conservative government, but dare I say, actually, under the Labour government as well. We are not being funded properly, but we have managed to deliver our services successfully. We're not in dire financial constraints. We've shown we can do things well. Just because we're an island and just because we have a small population doesn't mean we shouldn't be able to carry on doing as we do.
So if I can paraphrase your response there, devolution welcomed warmly, perhaps local government reorganisation, a little bit more concern around that one.
I would say a cool reception on any intention to reorganise the Isle of Wight, but a warm but cautious welcome to devolution. We will need to see the details worked through.
Absolutely. So, Malcolm, obviously a different in a slightly different space. What are your first thoughts on devolution and LGR?
So, whilst they're happening at the same time, devolution and reorganisation are quite different things, and I'm sure you understand that. So, England has one of the most centralised power structures of any country in the developed world. So, whilst I welcome the devolution of powers from Westminster, I am concerned about the proposed solution that puts a single elected person at the centre, as this risks taking democracy further away from our residents. So in terms of opportunities, devolution, we get a seat at the national table. This is a good thing. We get the Hampshire and the Isle of Wight region gets a seat at the national table. And you get new powers. There are some new powers that are coming with devolution in transport and local infrastructure, skills and employment, housing and development. There are some things that are being flowed down from central government to more locally, and this should allow, for example, the opportunity to develop an improved, fully integrated public transport system, and also potentially to boost business in our area. So there's some good things there. And I can see why devolution appeals. The idea that we get more power into our region. However, I am concerned about the proposed method for how this power is passed down to our regions. Hampshire and the Solent region has a population that's greater than Northern Ireland. Northern Ireland has a legislative assembly, 90 democratically elected members. Our economy in our area is similar size to Wales, and Wales has a parliament, the Senate, with 60 democratically elected members. But the devolution proposal before us is not to move to an assembly. It's not a whole group of people at that level, but rather a single elected mayor. A mayor who will be in post for 4 years, irrespective of how well or how badly they do their job. A mayor who, unlike council leaders, or indeed even the Prime Minister, cannot be removed partway through their term, even if that individual starts to go off the rails, and we can all think of maybe examples of that in the world nowadays. Other local authorities, for example, Bristol and Liverpool, have actually recently abolished the position of mayor, in part over concerns that it put too much power into the hands of one individual. And yet we're moving headlong in that direction. We live in a time of dissatisfaction with democracy. A recent report found that dissatisfied, frustrated, and let down were the most common words used in summing up how people feel about the UK's democracy today. Devolution of power from Westminster is an opportunity to change that. It's an opportunity to bring decisions that really affect local residents closer to them. However, it risks being an opportunity missed. Whilst the proposed devolution approach will bring decisions geographically closer to our residents, the proposed it risks moving democratic representation further away. A single elected official for 2.1 million people with no assembly and key decisions being made by civil servants is not improving democratic representation. It's moving it away. It's doing the complete opposite. The world's changed. Our residents are no longer just voting red and blue, nor are they red, blue, orange, and green. We have a real range of people and voices in our county, in our area, sorry, in our region. Our political system needs to modernise so that it can properly represent the people of this country with all our differing views and perspectives. I'd like to see genuine decentralisation of power from government, with decisions being made as close as possible to the communities they affect, and that uses a proportional representation voting system to ensure that all the different voices of our residents get heard. So overall, I do welcome the principle of devolution, but I am uncomfortable with the offer that's on the table before us. Devolution and reorganisation must genuinely empower local communities, not distance them from decision-making processes, as the proposal risks doing.
An interesting perspective there, Malcolm. And again, we'll just pause you there for a second. I mean, it's interesting that you're looking at that in terms of the offer on the table. It's felt all along this process that it's a very binary offer. You either get the mayoral model with what appears to be a cabinet made up of either a gang of three or a gang of four, and that's your choice. So I guess at the if it's a heads or tails choice, isn't it? I guess so. So are you still on the side of rather have it than not?
I don't think we're actually being given a choice.
Well, that
We're
is
being
another
told
that
devolution is happening. This wasn't
yeah.
something we chose. It was something the government's decided is a good idea. And I mean, it's interesting to note that 10 out of the 11 current Metro mayors are Labour mayors. And you wonder maybe that's influenced them a little bit.
Well, you to quote a famous political statement, you might think that, but I couldn't possibly comment. So what about local government reorganisation? I mean,
Uh,
Hampshire, we'll come on to it a bit deeper later. What do you think it means, and what are your first thoughts on it as a concept?
so again, I think there are opportunities. I think there's opportunities and risks with it as well. So there's some real good opportunities. Across the country, we've got a real mixed bag of how local government works in different areas. And that doesn't make sense. There's a mishmash of different types of local authorities across the country, each with different roles and responsibilities. Frankly, our residents don't really understand. Currently, our residents here who have both a district council and a county council don't understand who's responsible for what. So there are opportunities there for making that smoother, making it work better. And by merging the two, there's less chance of issues falling between local authorities. For example, on planning and transport, planning currently falls to the district authorities, such as Winchester, but transport planning falls to county authorities, Hampshire. Combining the two should mean more robust plans. So that's a good thing. And also, I think it's just a shake-up of local government is no bad thing. I've spent my career working in business, and no business stays the same for well, more than 10 years, really. There's always refreshes, always changes happening. And there are advantages to doing that. And so I think, it is good to have a shake-up. But there are risks as well. I mean, there's concerns. Other areas of the country which have already seen this, but similar changes have been made, have seen the number of local councillors reduced by 2/3. Whilst many of our residents might see that as a good thing to get rid of a whole load of councillors. There's also a risk that it concentrates power decision making into a smaller number of individuals and limits cross-party representation. One of the ideas that the government's put on the table is they said that moving to unitaries will be improved democratic representation. I think there's a lot of us still struggling to get our heads around that and how that's going to work if you've got fewer councillors.
Thank you. No, a very, very thorough answer. I think we'll dig into a little bit more of that in a minute. Simon.
Okay, lovely. Thank you. So, so Malcolm, oh, sorry, beg your pardon. I'm looking at the wrong one, wrong question. Beg your pardon. So Andrew, sorry. So the Isle of Wight, that's 140,000 or so residents. Doesn't meet the threshold that were in the green paper for a standalone authority. But I understand that the council voted to apply basically to be considered as an exception, and there were grounds for exception kind of mentioned in the green paper. Why is it so important that the island has that ability to not be merged in that way with other authorities?
I think I'd start you from the fact that if it's not broken, you don't need to fix it. And we have been delivering services very successfully, I would say. Residents might disagree, but those services have been delivered without too much difficulty, other than the overarching difficulty of a reducing amount of government funding. But we're not in the same dire situation as, say, our Hampshire County colleagues are, or Southampton City colleagues are, who've had to have kind of special arrangements made to some extent. So the Isle of Wight has a unique identity. It is Britain's, I think certainly England's, largest by population offshore island. We see ourselves as islanders, so we have a sense of identity. And one of the driving principles of devolution is the sense of place, the sense of connection to your community. But on a practical level, there is nothing that merging with us with a mainland authority that can deal with the fact that we have a stretch of water between us and what we occasionally call the North Island, somewhat bigger than ourselves. In fact, one of the things I most welcome about devolution, although it's not mentioned in the white paper, and this was unfortunate, is the potential. Malcolm was talking about this himself, about integrated local transport. Potential for us to actually have somebody, even if it is a mayor, to have a oversight and perhaps power over the ferries that connect us. We are utterly dependent upon cross-island travel. It costs us more to provide our services because of that. Local government reorganisation will not change it. That water will not disappear. And because we are a necessarily smaller economy, that we can't generate those economies of scale, certainly for smaller and medium-sized businesses that might otherwise supply a council just by merging across the Solent. You don't have the opportunities to look at your estate rationalisation, which buildings are housed where. So how would you deal with the fact that you may have to have in the case of a cross-Solent merged authority, a county hall or a city hall or whatever it is to be called hall, which is the other side of that water, and how do you deal with the fact that residents who need to physically access that facility would happen. So you could start to see the complications that would come from fixing a problem that does not exist. The real problem for us as the Isle of Wight is that it costs us it's been estimated about £20 million more per year to provide services than our mainland neighbours, and that can only be addressed by government recognising through the funding formula that we are and essentially have an element of isolation in terms of our service delivery. So that is broadly the argument that we have made, and it is an argument that has been accepted by our Hampshire colleagues, Hampshire, Southampton, Portsmouth, at unitary and at county and at district and at borough level. This has been accepted. The island genuinely does have exceptional circumstances, and it is right that the government put that into its white paper. And let's be honest, if you were going to define what exceptional circumstances looks like, well, having a load of water around you probably makes you exceptional. Others may disagree, but certainly we feel that we can continue to deliver for ourselves as a unitary authority, but still be a very good partner with our mainland colleagues in terms of the regional devolution that is being proposed. May I just pick up at this point something that Malcolm was saying? I too agree with him that the model that we're being offered is unsatisfactory. It would be better to have a model more like that of London, where you have a mayor and an assembly and keep the mayor accountable and in check to some point. But one thing I've learned from 30 years on and off in local government and being on 3 different councils over that period of time is local government evolves. It rarely do you get full-on revolution. Even something like this quite dramatic change in direction is actually an evolution of what was happening under the previous Conservative government of devolution. My view is if we can get devolution into the regions established and working, then we can work on the model to make it better. Personally, I would like to see a mayor supported by an assembly, which is elected not just for one person, but proper representatives across that. And one point that we will very strongly make, if this is seen through by government, is that if the mayor does not come from the Isle of Wight, that would be fantastic if that mayor does come from living this side of the Solent, then there should definitely be a deputy mayor with specific responsibility for the Isle of Wight.
Okay, and just to make sure we and our audience are kind of understand. So, what's being proposed at the moment, the current structure is that you've got Hampshire County Council, you've got Southampton and Portsmouth are unitary or separate unitary authorities, and the Isle of Wight acts as a unitary authority, making decisions and having the powers that a county effectively does because of all of the reasons you've talked about. It is what's being asked for, rather than the island remaining. Obviously, it's geographically separate. No one's suggesting that changes. But in regards to politically, that it would be part of what's being termed as Hampshire and the Solent. I think that's the term that the government have kind of done. But it would be one of the authorities that are within that grouping. Is that right? Have I explained that right? Is that how it's understood?
Well, broadly so. So as far as we understand what the government's looking for, it wants to see the end of boroughs and districts that are currently exist in Hampshire and the city council there in Winchester. And replaced with unitaries across the whole region. Now, the number that might finally be in place is still very much up in the air, but all of those councils still delivering broadly the same range of services as they currently deliver. There is some nervousness about some of our planning powers perhaps being pulled upwards. That would be a kind of anti-devolution approach. But there could be some sensibility. It might be sensible to do that to some extent, as we do with our police and our fire services, to combine across the 2 counties. And being somebody who started out my political life on Southampton City Council, while Southampton and Portsmouth are unitaries, they are still part of the geographical county area of Hampshire County. So I do see it very much as a 2 counties way forward on this, with special recognition for those cities. So I think it's very important to understand that our councils won't disappear as such. They may be reorganised. We will get this additional closer to our communities layer of government, which will be in the model that the Labour government is proposing, indeed the model that the Conservatives generally put forward as well, is one of a mayor-led authority with certain voting rights for the unitary authorities alongside them. The mayor may have a veto over those authorities, but we're we're in the early days of this, and I think
Mhm.
you might come onto it later as to why the government has felt it necessary to be so fast tracked about all of this.
Yeah, it's
Definitely.
yeah.
So, Malcolm, if we can look at Hampshire, it's currently quite a confusing setup, isn't it? Yeah, I think you touched on it in your early, you represent the Meon Valley, but you represent both on Winchester City Council and on Hampshire County Council. And I know there are parts where, Alton has a town council which sits under East Hampshire District, which sits under Hampshire County Council. Surely bringing this all down to one layer has got to be a simpler and much more efficient way of running services.
I generally agree with you. I think it has like you said, it is confusing at the moment for people, the different layers, and the fact it's different even between Southampton, Portsmouth, and Hampshire.
Mm,
It is confusing for people, and so bringing it all together into unitaries, yeah, I mean, it seems to make sense. At the moment, for example, the rubbish, your waste is collected by, around here, my waste is collected by Winchester City Council, who then take it off to Hampshire County Council, who then process the waste and sort it all out or get rid of it or, treat it at that point. It There are inefficiencies there, and there's got to be opportunities to do it better. And also, what's interesting, and just picking up on that example, my understanding is that each of the district councils actually collects their rubbish in a different way.
mm,
So some district councils still have bags of rubbish that they collect. Some use the more traditional bins, rolly bins that we're familiar, perhaps more familiar with in general. And then the number of bins varies between different places and how frequently they get collected. So yeah, there's a whole there is opportunity for doing it more efficiently by bringing these things together. But it's all, as with a lot of these things, it's all about how it's done, not whether it's done. It's the actual implementation that's going to be key.
And what are your first thoughts on that? Because obviously you sit on both councils, so you I guess you're seeing firsthand how they potentially work differently. And as you say, you spent most of your career in business, and what are your first thoughts on those two organisations being able to smoothly integrate into one?
Yes, right. So I think Andrew might be able to empathise with me. Yeah, when I only got involved in local politics 3 years ago when I was elected, and it took me a while to get an understanding of how it worked at Winchester, how the system worked, and then I assumed that was how it worked in all local government. And then I started at Hampshire, and it's well, not completely different, but there's a fair amount of differences there. And I'm pretty sure, from my experience, it's similar. I think we'll see that in every single district council around Hampshire. It operates slightly differently.
Mm,
So to pull all that together and to align it is going to be a hell of a challenge. And there are going to be some. Um, I mean, our job partly as councillors is to try and make sure that that happens as smooth, help that to happen as smoothly as it can.
mm. No, I think as you say, the real challenge is going to be in the detail of having worked in very large organisations historically myself, when takeovers or mergers happen, even at the most basic of levels, the devil really does come down as to how those two organisations agree on a new way of working. So no, I think more to come on that. Is there anything kind of you think? Obviously, Hampshire is the only non-unitary authority that's coming together. Do you think that represents any, does that make a different challenge to the other three, or do you think everyone's in a very similar boat?
So I was looking at comparing our region to other places around the country who are doing this. And from what I can tell, Hampshire and the Isle of Wight and our region have got the most complex, perhaps the most complex reorganisation of any area. We have all these district councils. We've got a county council. We've got 3 unitaries. And there's a good chance that maybe apart from Isle of Wight, there's a good chance that all of those others are going to change dramatically. And that's a huge change in our area. And other areas, you look at along the coast and in some other areas, it's a bit more logical. You can kind of see which district councils and county councils and are going to match up. It's pretty clear. You can split a county in half or whatever. For a lot of them, it's pretty straightforward. Hampshire, it's not. We've got a really big county. It's a very diverse county. You see that even with our political representation. We've got what is it? We've got independents or a group of independents and team on the Isle of Wight. We've got Conservatives running the Hampshire County Council, Lib Dems running Portsmouth, and Labour running Southampton. We have a really mixed political makeup as well. So yeah, this is going to be incredibly difficult and challenging to get all those people pulling in the same direction. And I can see that going to be there's going to be some tensions.
Definitely.
Also got
Simon.
yeah.
Sorry, carry on.
Oh, sorry. And I was just going to sort of add into that kind of mix. You do also have the 2 national parks authorities that cross over into from one county into another. So, and they have responsibilities and powers. So you have that additional complication of how do you reorganize local government and still have regard to the governance side of those local authorities. And I'm sure we'll be getting onto it in a while. But to what extent does the north of your county outcome look northwards rather than southwards to the Solent, but northwards to the Thames Valley and perhaps eastwards in terms of its local economy? And I think this is one of the things that we might get onto later is had the government taken a longer term approach to looking at this, it might have done something even more radical, which might have been the redrawing of county boundaries as they did way back. I was 6, I think, at the time, 1972, when, of course, Hampshire moved. Hampshire's boundary actually moved in terms of a municipal sense. The ceremonial county of Hampshire is not the same as the municipal, the local government county of Hampshire. So there is still some of that argument to be had. And Malcolm, you're absolutely right. At a local government level, where I'm a Liberal Democrat, you're a Green, there are Conservatives, there are Labours, there are Independents, and undoubtedly others across the whole region. But we also have a diversity of political opinion at the Westminster level, and you would hope that would be reflecting through into the debates to be had in Parliament as this advances.
Well, thank you.
Simon. And that kind of moves us swiftly onto our next question. And just before I do, I wanted to share a comment that we've got because it feeds into the conversation that will take place from the next question. So I'll just quickly add that. So Elliot has said that we see the deficit down to local government level with the leader in cabinet model of councils, residents whose councillors are not in the administration are not represented by the council. And the question that we were going to ask that beautifully kind of segues into, so thank you, Elliot, was that what are the sorts of changes to both the services that they receive and the relationships that they have with their elected councillors could voters expect to see? Will that just be the larger councils crowding out the smaller ones? Malcolm, what are your thoughts on that?
So ideally, certainly for the mainland authorities, you'd be trying to get similar sized authorities. Mm-hmm. So that should be one of the goals when trying to set up the new unitary authorities, that they're similar size. So then you can have balance between them. But within a council, you it can be a, I mean, the whole way our system is set up is so that the people in power are the ones who control everything. I mean, that's the way our system's set up. As a Green and Andrew as a Lib Dem, I'm sure I'm sure we both share the view that there are better ways that we could be doing this. Proportional representation would be a much better way for individuals for everybody to get heard. When I was elected 3 years ago, I had people approach me who said, people in their 60s approached me who said, that they'd been voting their entire life and they'd never voted for somebody who actually got in. And this was a first for them. And they were so excited. But that's not how the system should work. Increasingly we take the mayor, for example. We're going to have one mayor and we've got all these parties, and that mayor is going to come from one party. That mayor could have, with all the parties that we've got and the split that we have across Hampshire, that mayor could have maybe 25-30% of the vote, and they could only 3 out of 10 people could be voting for that mayor, and that mayor has all the power for our region. Yeah, that doesn't seem right to me. And also the reduction in the number of councillors, the reduction in the opportunity for people to be represented by somebody, that concerns me as well. So yeah, I don't think it's a great model, but we've got to, it is what it is, and we've got to make the best of it. I know it's made a huge difference both at Winchester and at Hampshire by having a different voice in the room. The way that we talk about issues now it takes into account when there's a Green there, you talk more. They're more considerate of the environment and the energy implications of things in a way that perhaps wouldn't have happened before. So you can make a difference just not being in power and actually being there on your own. But it's the system as a whole could be better.
Okay. Thank you. So, Andrew, what do you think about the changes that people are likely to see with their services and their representation?
Well, certainly one big change that Isle of Wight residents are going to see in terms of representation is we are moving away from the cabinet scrutiny model. We have decided that from May the 21st this year, we are going to go back to a committee system of local government. So there won't be a cabinet. There won't be a leader who appoints that cabinet. And what you will have is a set of committees. They're called service committees. They will be required to be politically proportionate as far as is possible, with trying to draw a committee of 9 people from 39 councillors. But you will see certainly the Conservatives, the Independents, the Greens that are on our council, and of course the Liberal Democrats gaining seats on those seats, hopefully in such a way that the way it works is there will be that diversity of opinion. When I was first elected in Southampton in 1991, it was a committee system. It was a Labour-controlled council. It was a big Labour majority. But what I found was, because you had a voice on those committees, that across the political divide, most people are reasonable. And if you make a reasonable argument, then you can change minds and change emphasis. So certainly the Isle of Wight is hopefully going to be a bit of a trailblazer on that for the rest of our northern neighbours as well, in terms of how people will see their local councillor actually having both a voice, but also really importantly a vote that really will count in terms of decision making. How will it change more generally? Well, if my wish is fulfilled, it won't change it much, because the Isle of Wight will remain a unitary authority. Even if we were merged, we would remain a unitary authority. So the range of services delivered by the one council would be broadly the same. What I would hope, and Malcolm, you're absolutely right, that one person trying to represent 1.5 million people, potentially offer 30% of the vote and the first past the post, offer maybe a turnout of 30 or 40%, is not not the way we would like to see things done. But at least that those voters will know that they have the chance to hold that person to account, both at the ballot box, the next 4-yearly cycle, and also throughout their time in office of being the publics. We are all public servants. We are accountable. We can be questioned. It will be very important that the mayor is accountable through some structure, and ideally as accountable as possible to direct public question. All of local government has rights for public questioning, usually at the start of their meetings, and we would hope that that would be there. But I guess one of the things is that if this is at its most successful, in some ways you would hope residents wouldn't even notice what's happened, other than that things are getting better. I'm an eternal optimist that things could get better. But most people aren't thinking about who's running their council all of the time. They've got other things to get on with. It is largely when things are going wrong that you see that engagement with people. The final thing I'd say on that, we could flip that on its head though and say, well, if we are to get things right, we should be engaging with people from the very start on any new project. So one of the important things will be about whoever becomes the mayor, that they put in place mechanisms by which public consultation isn't the kind of lip service tick box exercise that it so often is. I think one of the greatest weaknesses of local government is that it doesn't invest enough of its time and effort into talking to those people who are going to be affected earliest on. So you design the service to meet those needs and demands as effectively as possible. But like I say, I'm an optimist, and after 30 odd years on and off in local government, the only way to survive in office, Malcolm, I can tell you, you've been on 3 years, is to try to retain some optimism and just to keep speaking up.
Marvelous, and I think that leads us on to our. I'm going to skip ahead in the interest of time about a question that might need quite a chunk of optimism. I mean, the figures move, but Hampshire is got about a 200 million deficit. Southampton very significant. So at the moment, no new money appears to be coming forward. And if you put all 4 of the authorities together, it looks like they're going to start at about minus 300 million. Do you believe that local government reorganisation can save that sort of money, Malcolm?
No.
We'll move on to no. We need more than that.
I mean, it's LGR's not going to, that reorganisation is not going to solve the financial issues in the government. Just looking at Hampshire alone, Hampshire County Councils, you're talking about the debt, but there's actually, there's also one bit I'm particularly concerned about is the recurring costs. Hampshire County Council's Chief Financial Officer has said it's almost inevitable that Hampshire will be issuing a Section 114 notice for 2026-27 unless there's a change in government's approach to funding. They're currently forecasting a budget gap next year of over £100 million, and it's increasing every year after that. So the year after, maybe 200, 300, it's a massive increase. The council's been covering, for the last few years, the council's been covering the increased costs by reducing services and by and using up its savings. Frankly, it's going to clear out its savings this year. There's going to be nothing left, and so it's difficult to see how Hampshire will not declare an S114 next year. And I think it's important to explain a little bit about why it's in that position, so that people can understand. So part of the reason is that they froze council tax for 5 years. I mean, that hasn't helped. Hampshire has one of the lowest for a county council. Hampshire has one of the lowest council taxes in the country. But another key issue is the ongoing increase in social care costs. Just looking at the LGA figures, the Local Government Association figures, across all county councils, average social care expenditure as a proportion of total council spend has increased from 62% in 2016-17 to 80% in 2023-24. So a bigger chunk, a massively bigger chunk of all of our funding, of all of the county council's funding, is going on social care. And there's an ever reducing amount of funding that's being left for everything else, and that's killing that is killing the county's finances. And there's reasons for those costs going up. So every month in Hampshire, there's a net increase of 30 people living in care homes who become reliant on the county council to pay their costs. And I mean, if any of you know who've got relatives who are in care homes, it's becoming expensive. So the 30 more every year net increase every month, the net increase of 30 more people needing Hampshire support. And then alongside that, you've got children's social care costs are increasing. Every month there is an extra 200 applicants for education, health and care plans. That's the first step in children getting special educational needs support. And this has been led to a massive rise in costs. Just looking at, for example, at the home to school transport costs. 10 years ago, they were £8 million per year for the county council. They're now £75 million per year just on the transport costs. And next year, they're forecast to be over £100 million. Now, the council has tried to push back against this. In some cases, when they think that the people applying it's inappropriate, but generally they're losing court. The government has set the bar very low, and so a lot of people are qualifying. So this local government reorganisation is not going to solve these problems. They're still going to be there, and they're growing, and they're getting worse every year. And so we need to understand that is a bigger issue that needs fixed. Otherwise, we're going to be burdening all these unitaries with a financial, with an unsustainable, putting them all in an unsustainable financial position as soon as they're set up.
And it's interesting because I'm just going to throw that over to Andrew, because, we do have 4 authorities, and again, no blame intended, but Portsmouth and the Isle of Wight effectively are able to run a more balanced budget. So I guess, Andrew, if I can ask it slightly provocatively, obviously you want to remain an island, but do you believe that the money can be saved, or do you think you're going to be asked to chip in to close some of that 300 million funding gap?
Well, if we remain a unitary authority, then nothing will devolve onto us in terms of that gap, because unless that gap is somehow absorbed into the mayoral authority, which it may well do, and then some of that will potentially fall on us. And then, in a sense, it's the flip side of the argument that our mainland neighbours would say why they don't want to be merged with the Isle of Wight, because of our additional costs, the 20 million. But Malcolm's spoken absolutely rightly of the structural changes in society. We are getting older. We need more care. I have a relative who has been looked after and supported by local authority financing of their care home needs. It is expensive, and it can only get more expensive as people live longer, become hopefully staying healthier longer, but by living longer, the kind of health conditions that do come to you and very much later in life are more expensive to respond to. And we are rightly doing more for people, younger people, who have education, health, and needs, as you've just said, Malcolm. The problem is, the thing that worries me most is, even if savings are made, and I think there was a study from Ernst & Young, or it may have been PricewaterhouseCoopers, that suggests local government reorganisation can save money of the order of 20, maybe 20 million a year for a middling size unitary authority. But we've already seen in terms of some of the statements that Rachel Reeves, as Chancellor, has made, that she believes the government itself is financially very challenged. It would be very easy for it to soak away those savings by simply not sticking with the level of funding that it currently gives. So what I'm hoping, and I think I alluded to earlier, is that our representatives in Parliament will be strongly making the case that this is not a panacea or a problem that has been in place for nearly 15 years, which is the continued diminution in the amount of money that local government gets, and now through underfunding. Maybe there was some case early in those years of austerity. As a Liberal Democrat, I have to accept that we were part of a government that introduced some that austerity program, but it went way too far, and is not being properly addressed even under this Labour government, which is probably why so many people feel now particularly disillusioned by politics. I think, Malcolm, you were saying this at the very start of the piece, that polling just shows that people just do not have the faith that they should have in their government at all levels. So to finish up, I would just echo Malcolm's one-word answer at the start, which is no.
No.
I do not believe local government or reorganisation, however it was done, would save anywhere near the money that is needed to not lead to new authorities being faced with real financial strain from the very start.
Thank you. I shall throw you to Simon for our final question.
Okay, thank you. So we touched on it earlier on, and obviously I appreciate that neither of you are mind readers or have an inside track as to why. But one thing that has puzzled lots of commentators is the haste at which the whole devolution and the separate mechanics of local government reorganisation agenda is being pursued. Do you have any thoughts on what the hell, you might use different words, is behind the rush? Who wants to go first?
I think well, I'll pick that one up then. Politics is a dark art at times, and an incoming government will want to do those things which it will think are the most unpopular in some ways. At the very start of its legislative program. So reorganizing local government potentially could have some level of unpopularity. So maybe that was part of their thinking. They are clearly very influenced by what they have seen in the mayoral areas in other parts of England. So Andy Burnham is generally seen as quite successful as the mayor of Greater Manchester. Andy Street, the former Conservative mayor in and around Birmingham, I believe he was. I think that's right, isn't it? Andy was Birmingham, was generally seen as successful, although lost out to Labour narrowly at the last election. So I think they're driven by a feeling that this may be unpopular. They need to get that out of the way. That it will take a while to start to deliver results. So you want it to give yourself a maximum chance of results being delivered in your term of office. And usually most governments go back to the country after 4 years rather than the 5 that they are entitled to. And also a kind of a feeling that this is would be a win for them on a manifesto kind of thing. Everything else is very difficult for them, but they would be able to point to this as something that they had achieved. So, but I have no insight into the Labour government's brain, and not being a Labour Party member at any point in my life, I have no real insight into the way those ideologies inform their programme. But so I may be completely wrong, in which case be happily proved wrong.
Thank you, Malcolm. What are your thoughts?
I just, having come from a business background, I do struggle to find anything done by local government which is done in a rush. I know commentators are saying this is fast. To me, a big change like this, I've been through several mergers and reorganizations, and not one has taken us as long as this reorganization is going to take. It's one of the reasons businesses try to move quickly is because of the impact on staff. I mean, it's not good for anyone to be in limbo for a long period of time. Contrary to the bad press, it's often spoken about. Most local authorities officers that I work with work really hard, and they do try to deliver the best they can for their communities. I'm not saying it's all perfect, but they are trying really hard. And to put those officers into a state of limbo for what, 3-4 years is pretty tough ask. So there are good reasons to move quickly. I can also understand the government's pushing to move quickly. If in Hampshire and the Solent region alone, there are 15 different local authorities, and each one will have a different view on how reorganisation should happen. If the government gives any hint that the reorganisation will take longer than the current parliamentary term, then I'd be amazed if there weren't people who tried to delay the process, hoping that a general election might change how it's going to happen. So to actually make it happen, they'll want to do it within their existing term, if they really want to push it through. So yeah, I mean, I could see good reasons for moving quickly, but that means doing some compromises. We haven't had a chance to talk much about the boundaries. There are areas around the county where looking at the boundaries might make sense. It might make sense for some parts of some areas to be associated with other counties, and even within my own division. I cover Whiteley, but part of it's in Winchester and part of it's in Fareham. Frankly, that doesn't make an awful lot of sense. So it would be good to look at the boundaries, but to do that would take a much longer period of time, and that would drag out the process even more. So the government said they're only going to look at boundaries in extreme situations. So I'm expecting generally a lot of the boundaries to stay where they are, for better or worse at this point. So yeah, I'm perhaps against most commentators on this one. I actually think if you're going to do it, just get on with it.
Marvelous. So thank you both for your perspectives this evening. I mean, this is a topic that we think, and I think most others think, that it's going to run and run. So really appreciate you both coming and giving up your Sunday evening to give us your insight. There will be more to come, I'm certain of this, and I think when those boundaries discussions start to happen and who's paying the bill, then if you're happy to, we'd be delighted to have you both come back on again.
Well, thank you for having us this evening.
Thank you indeed.
No worries. So you've been listening to the Pompey Politics Podcast. I've been Ian Tiny Morris.
And our guests this evening have been Andrew Garratt and Malcolm Wallace. Thank you very much both. I've been Simon Sansbury. We're going to take a 3-week break now for Easter. When we come back, we're going to be speaking to Solent Waspy women and hearing about their campaign and what the government decision means for them and their way forward. So please do remember to like, follow, subscribe, send biscuits and tea if you want, to wherever you find us on social media or wherever you listen to your podcast. But we'll see you at 6:27 in 3 weeks' time. Don't forget to like, follow and comment on Facebook, or comment and subscribe on YouTube. Find us on all the social media platforms: Facebook, X, YouTube, Threads, LinkedIn.